Today, I would like to study Bhagavad-gita chapter 6 together. And let's start with the invocation prayer. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Hare Krishna. So, I'm not going to go over one verse right now. I would like to get into verses and purports more specifically a little later. And what I would like to do is just read the English translations together. I'll read them of chapter 6. There's 47, I think, 47 verses, and I'll just share where I'm coming from a little bit. I was inspired to study a particular verse, I think verse 17, about regulating. The verse is, "He who is temperate in his habits of eating, sleeping, working, recreation can mitigate all material pains by practicing the yoga system." Because I was wanting to just talk about balance today. This is something that I'm meditating on, so it's like alive for me. Living a yogic life and having balance in all areas of my life, which I have not been experiencing lately, and coming to the realization that I'm on a yogic path, especially with this new identity of Damayanti, Devi, Dasi, and experiencing initiation ceremony, official commitment. I feel like I'm waking up to that this is a really yogic path that I'm on, and then looking for my history, where I came from to where I'm at. It's just a big contrast. And so when I went to look at this verse and look up balance in life, regulating all areas of life, I was really curious, well, what is this about? What's the verse before and what's the verse after? I kind of wanted to get the context. And then I just read every verse and thought, I just want to just immerse in this whole chapter together, and then I'll share more later. So the reason is it just paints a full picture of like the yogic lifestyle and why. And I'll share more later. But let's read chapter 6 Bhagavad-gita, and we're just going to read the English translations, and I'll read them so you all can follow along with me. The Blessed Lord said, "One who is unattached to the fruits of his work and who works as he is obligated is in the renounced order of life, and he is the true mystic, not he who lights no fire and performs no work." What is called renunciation is the same as yoga, or linking oneself with the Supreme. For no one can become a yogi unless he renounces the desire for sense gratification. For one who is a neophyte in the eightfold yoga system, work is said to be the means, and for one who has already attained yoga, cessation of all material activities is said to be the means. A person is said to have attained to yoga when, having renounced all material desires, he neither acts for sense gratification nor engages in fruitive activities. A man must elevate himself by his own mind, not degrade himself. The mind is the friend of the conditioned soul and his enemy as well. For him who has conquered the mind is the best of friends. Or for one who has failed to do so, his very mind will be the greatest enemy. For one who has conquered the mind, the supersoul is already reached, for he has attained tranquility. To such a man, happiness and distress, heat and cold, honor and dishonor are all the same. A person is said to be established in self-realization and is called a yogi or mystic, when he is fully satisfied by virtue of acquired knowledge and realization. Such a person is situated in transcendence and is self-controlled. He sees everything, whether it be pebbles, stones, or gold, as the same. A person is said to be still further advanced when he regards all, the honest well-wisher, friends and enemies, the envious, the pious, the sinner, and those who are indifferent and impartial, with an equal mind. A transcendentalist should always try to concentrate his mind on the Supreme Self. He should live alone in a secluded place and should always carefully control his mind. He should be free from desires and feelings of possessiveness. To practice yoga, one should go to a secluded place and should lay kusa grass on the ground and then cover it with a deerskin and a soft cloth. The seat should neither be too high nor too low and should be situated in a sacred place. The yogi should then sit on it very firmly and should practice yoga by controlling the mind and the senses, purifying the heart, and fixing the mind on one point. One should hold one's body, neck, and head erect in a straight line and stare steadily at the tip of the nose. Thus, with an unagitated, subdued mind, devoid of fear, completely free from sex life, one should meditate upon me within the heart and make me the ultimate goal of life. Thus, practicing control of the body, mind, and activities, the mystic transcendentalist attains the kingdom of God or the abode of Krishna by cessation of material existence. There is no possibility of one's becoming a yogi, O Arjuna, if one eats too much or eats too little, sleeps too much or does not sleep enough. He who is temperate in his habits of eating, sleeping, working, and recreation can mitigate all material pains by practicing the yoga system. When the yogi, by practice of yoga, disciplines his mental activities and becomes situated in transcendence, devoid of all material desires, he is said to have attained yoga. As a lamp in a windless place does not waver, so the transcendentalist, whose mind is controlled, remains always steady in his meditation on the transcendent self. The stage of perfection is called trance or samadhi. When one's mind is completely restrained from material mental activities by practice of yoga, this is characterized by one's ability to see the self by the pure mind and to relish and rejoice in the self. In that joyous state, one is situated in boundless transcendental happiness and enjoys himself through transcendental senses. Established thus, one never departs from the truth, and upon gaining this, he thinks there is no greater gain. Being situated in such a position, one is never shaken, even in the midst of greatest difficulty. This indeed is actual freedom from all miseries arising from material contact. One should engage oneself in the practice of yoga with undeviating determination and faith. One should abandon without exception all material desires born of false ego and thus control all the senses on all sides by the mind. Gradually, step by step, with full conviction, one should become situated in trance by means of intelligence, and thus the mind should be fixed on the self alone and should think of nothing else. From whatever and wherever the mind wanders, due to its flickering and unsteady nature, one must certainly withdraw it and bring it back under the control of the self. The yogi whose mind is fixed on me verily attains the highest happiness. By virtue of his identity with Brahman, he is liberated. His mind is peaceful, his passions are quieted, and he is freed from sin. Steady in the self, being freed from all material contamination, the yogi achieves the highest perfectional stage of happiness in touch with the Supreme. A true yogi observes me in all beings and also sees every being in me. Indeed, the self-realized man sees me everywhere. For one who sees me everywhere and sees everything in me, I am never lost, nor is he ever lost to me. The yogi who knows that I and the supersoul within all creatures are one, worships me and remains always in me in all circumstances. He is a perfect yogi who, by comparison to his own self, sees the true equality of all beings, both in their happiness and distress, O Arjuna. Arjuna said, O Madhusudana, The system of yoga which you have summarized appears impractical and unendurable to me, for the mind is restless and unsteady. For the mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate, and very strong, O Krishna, and to subdue it, it seems to me more difficult than controlling the wind. The blessed Lord said, O mighty armed son of Kunti, it is undoubtedly very difficult to curb the restless mind, but it is possible by constant practice and by detachment. For one whose mind is unbridled, self-realization is difficult. But he whose mind is controlled and who strives by right means is assured of success. That is my opinion. Arjuna said, what is the destination of the man of faith who does not persevere, who in the beginning takes to the process of self-realization, but who later desists due to worldly mindedness and thus does not attain perfection in mysticism? O mighty armed Krishna, does not such a man, being deviated from the path of transcendence, perish like a riven cloud with no position in any sphere? This is my doubt, O Krishna, and I ask you to dispel it completely. But for yourself, no one is to be found who can destroy this doubt. The blessed Lord said, Son of Prita, a transcendentalist engaged in auspicious activities does not meet with destruction, either in this world or in the spiritual world. One who does good, my friend, is never overcome by evil. The unsuccessful yogi, after many, many years of enjoyment on the planets of the pious living entities, is born into a family of righteous people or into a family of rich aristocracy. Or he takes his birth in a family of transcendentalists who are surely great in wisdom. Barely such a birth is rare in this world. On taking such a birth, he again revives the divine consciousness of his previous life, and he tries to make further progress in order to achieve complete success, O son of Kuru. By virtue of the divine consciousness in his previous life, he automatically becomes attracted to the yogic principles, even without seeking them. Such an inquisitive transcendentalist, striving for yoga, stands always above the ritualistic principles of the scriptures. But when the yogi engages himself with sincere endeavor in making further progress, being washed of all contaminations, then ultimately, after many, many births of practice, he attains the supreme goal. A yogi is greater than the ascetic, greater than the empiricist, and greater than the fruitive worker. Therefore, O Arjuna, in all circumstances, be a yogi. And of all yogis, he who always abides in me with great faith, worshiping me in transcendental, loving service, is most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gnanjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadam Mayam Dadati Sva Parantikam. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Pada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupan Sagrajatam Sahaganara Gunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitam Cha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gorange Radhe Vrindavaneshvari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpata Rubhyasha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitinan Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shiva Sari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Sarasvati Devi Gauravani Prachurani Nivishesha Srinivadi Paschata Desha Dharane. Okay, so that was really fun. We read all the English translations of all the verses in chapter 6 all at once. And I never did that, and it's really like, it's like getting a complete picture of the lifestyle. You know, there's like what works in practicing any yoga system, including bhakti yoga. Now, I know that Srila Prabhupada, he says that bhakti, you know, you can just practice bhakti yoga. You don't have to do all of these yogic things like sitting in a special way and breathing in a special way. And that's not the main focus of this whole on this chapter, but it's a part of the chapter is like how to sit and how to breathe. So I see people laughing at bhakti yoga retreat. Anyway, so you're having fun in the philosophical class. Hare Krishna. So we can just chant japa and read Srila Prabhupada's books and eat prasadam and follow the regular principles. I mean, the regulations, you know, so we can do them like sort of like the minimum, and I think everything will be fine. Like we don't have to be balanced, you know. But the thing is, Krishna is saying here, and Prabhupada is translating this book for a reason. He's giving the full picture of like what will be a well-rounded, full balanced life to support all those essential bhakti yoga activities. Like the essential bhakti yoga activities are chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra in a regulated way. Srila Prabhupada says a minimum of 16 rounds per day, and following the 4 regular principles. These things help that practice. No meat, fish, or eggs, no illicit sex, no intoxication, and no gambling. These things support that essential process. And then there's reading, and there's association, and eating prasadam, and feasting, and dancing, and singing. So those are all things that are like essential that bhakti yogis do together. But then we have our whole life, you know, day to day. And there are things that support those bhakti yoga practices, and a lot of it was said in chapter 6. So something that, like a summary of what Prabhupada has said about this chapter, which is called, the chapter is called Sankhya Yoga. I don't feel like really deeply like realized in this definition of the word Sankhya, but I took a couple of quotes from Prabhupada about it. He says the analytical study of the elements of material nature and the concentration of the mind upon the super soul are the sum and substance of the Sankhya philosophical system. The perfection of this Sankhya yoga culminates in devotional service unto the absolute truth. Okay, so some people have previously done Sankhya yoga or yoga systems, or some people, maybe that some of you here, you know, like practice all types of other yoga things and eventually elevated, maybe in this lifetime, right? Maybe in previous lifetimes, you know, eventually like came to this culmination of devotional service, which is bhakti yoga, devotional service unto the absolute truth. So loving and serving God. This is considered by Srila Prabhupada the highest yoga system. And then there's some of us who, I mean, I don't know what I did in my past life, but just looking just in this life, what I did before bhakti yoga was no yoga practice, nothing that seemed yogic, like not a single thing. So it was like 34 years of not being trained in any single other yoga system at all. So so sometimes I don't really relate to like this culmination, or like the progression thing. Maybe in my past life I did karma yoga or other types of yoga, and eventually I got to bhakti. This time, I don't know, but, and I've heard, you know, I've heard some people say to me like, oh yeah, you probably practiced bhakti yoga in the past. I don't know. I wanted to share this. I was thinking about this chanting this morning. I was thinking about my like past, my childhood, and it was something that Garuda and I discovered, was that we had a favorite cartoon in common when we were children, the Muppet Babies. It's like, it's just so, it's like, oh, you like that? Yeah, I liked it. Like he was a boy, we were young and growing up in, I don't know, I guess the 80s, 90s. And, we knew so many of the same songs and TV shows and stuff. And like so much of my personal history is just American life of gratifying the senses, being entertained, what do I want to eat next? What do I want to watch next? I had favorite snacks, like, I had, I think there's like a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle pizza. You get it from the freezer and like put it in the microwave and then go like watch Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle cartoon. And I had like a favorite snack, peanut butter with crackers and like orange juice. And I just thought it was like the best combination, like I figured things out. The best food and the best entertainment I could find. And really, I was just totally numbing myself from feeling alone and not having any purpose or anything really that just, like satisfied the soul. So I just consumed screens and food, like for not just 34 years, not like, oh, once I hit Bhakti Yoga, I became a yogi. Like, no, it's still, to this day, I'm 40, I'm still, and having been initiated, like something has changed in the last 3 or 4 weeks. Not that, I can promise you that, oh, I'm going to be so steady from now on with this realization. But I feel like, oh, it's serious. What am I doing? And I'm like waking up to the fact that this is a yogic path, Bhakti Yoga. It is a yogic path. There are regulations that support the path, and there's things that interfere with it. And I've been more regulated. I've been more regulated with, my sleep was already like I was not oversleeping or undersleeping, so it was kind of like regulated there. But with eating, I've been very regulated. And then with chanting and morning program, and things are like coming into some balance in some ways. And I feel like depressed and like I don't want to do it. And I'm, resisting. It just feels like kind of like dry or boring, like not the previous taste I have for what's thrilling. And I know some of you may have heard me, how thrilled I am, how excited I am about Bhakti Yoga, So I have many sides to me. So I'm going to scroll through some of my notes here on the screen. So in text 16 of chapter 6 in Bhagavad-gita, Krishna says, there is no possibility of one's becoming a yogi, O Arjuna, if one eats too much or eats too little, sleeps too much or does not sleep enough. Okay, I think, there are probably multiple ways of looking at this. Like, well, you can become a bhakti yogi even if you're eating and sleeping too much or too little. I mean, I'm thinking there's probably like an elevator path to devote yourself to serving Krishna. At the same time, it's like, it is so difficult to think of Krishna when you're thinking of it doesn't go together. Just overeating, oversleeping, under and over eating and sleeping. It's very difficult to be thinking of Krishna. So when Krishna says there's no possibility of becoming a yogi with this imbalance, I'm thinking it's actually true. Like, it's like, I know for myself, I'm not thinking of Krishna when I'm like thinking of eating to entertain or to numb feelings. In the purport of that text 16, Prabhupada says, anyone who eats for sense pleasure or cooks for himself, not offering his food to Krishna, eats only sin. One who eats sin and eats more than is allotted to him cannot execute perfect yoga. So this is Prabhupada speaking. He's letting us know, yeah, it's true. Like, you can't really like perfect your yoga practice if you're eating for sense pleasure or cooking only for yourself. Now, we know that Srila Prabhupada's, the minimum is to be eating only prasadam. which means food that has been offered to the Lord, which is offerable. So not meat, fish, or eggs. Like it's a vegetarian diet that Krishna receives and is willing to accept as an offering. And he says that in the Bhagavad-gita somewhere in some verse about what he will accept. Fruit, leaf, seed. I don't know, there's one more he says. Water. If anyone wants to unmute and just finish that thought of what Krishna will receive as an offering.
Yes, whatever, you got it. Yeah. Patram pushpam plam tvayam yome bhaktya yachati taram bhakti paritam ashtami paritatmana. Yes. Fruit, flower, leaf, water. Yes. You got it.
Flower, leaf, water. So, so I like that Prabhupada says here, one who eats for sense pleasure or cooks for himself. So he's not saying and, so or, like if you're eating for your own pleasure, and I know it's really hard to control the tongue, and that's like, I guess it's the hardest one to control. You know, so it, of all the senses, or I don't really know if I'm saying it right, but so I understand that it's hard, but it's true. Like if we're eating for our own sense pleasure, yeah, like we're just not gonna be able to execute a perfect devotional service to the Lord, because it's inherently selfish towards your own gratification, not towards Krishna's gratification. So, oops, okay. In the next verse, which is the one that kind of first attracted me to this chapter, the text 17 of chapter 6 Bhagavad-gita, the translation of the verse is, he who is temperate in his habits of eating, sleeping, working, and recreation can mitigate all material pains by practicing the yoga system. Prabhupada says in the purport, extravagance in the matter of eating, sleeping, defending, and mating, which are demands of the body, can block advancement in the practice of yoga. And later he says, since there is no question of sense gratification, there is no material leisure for a person in Krishna consciousness. And because he is regulated in all his work, speech, sleep, wakefulness, and all other bodily activities, there is no material misery for him. So this is like the essence of what I'm experiencing. I'm experiencing material misery. I'm not like practicing a perfect yoga system, a perfect yoga practice. If we're being more broad-minded with like living a yogic life, not just the chanting and the regulations and the reading, but like, you know, keeping all life areas in balance. If I were to keep all life areas in balance and regulate my work, my speech, my sleep, my wakefulness, my, you know, the eating and the recreation and my, you know, keeping my mind focused on Krishna, then I would not be experiencing any material misery. I would be sort of transcendental and balanced and all these things described in chapter 6. And like what an endeavor to become balanced in all these areas of life. Like, I think it's necessary, even though I could maybe just take the elevator path and just do direct bhakti yoga activities, the most essential ones outlined by Srila Prabhupada. But, you know, Krishna himself is saying that these things are going to help the yogi. In chapter 6, and I can't, you know, remember everything that was said, but but we read it earlier, so we can read it again. So yeah, I'm just sharing with you, you know, I'm just sharing with you like what's on my mind. So, okay, so in chapter 6, text 46, Krishna says, a yogi is greater than the ascetic, greater than the empiricist, and greater than the fruitive worker. Therefore, O Arjuna, in all circumstances, be a yogi. So I don't know, I think this is significant, what Krishna is saying. Let's read the purport. So Srila Prabhupada says, when we speak of yoga, we refer to linking up our consciousness with the supreme absolute truth. Such a process is named differently by various practitioners in terms of the particular method adopted. When the linking up process is predominantly in fruitive activities, it is called karma yoga. When it is predominantly empirical, it is called jnana yoga. When it is predominantly in a devotional relationship with the Supreme Lord, it is called bhakti yoga. Bhakti yoga, or Krishna consciousness, is the ultimate perfection of all yogas, as will be explained in the next verse. The Lord has confirmed herein the superiority of yoga, but he has not mentioned that it is better than bhakti yoga. Bhakti yoga is full spiritual knowledge, and as such, nothing can excel it. Asceticism without self-knowledge is imperfect. Empiric knowledge without surrender to the Supreme Lord is also imperfect. And fruitive work without Krishna consciousness is a waste of time. Therefore, the most highly praised form of yoga performance mentioned here is bhakti yoga. And this is still more clearly explained in the next verse. I'll read the next verse, not the whole purport. But this, we're speaking of text 47 of chapter 6. And of all yogis, he who always abides in me with great faith, worshiping me in transcendental loving service, is most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. So Krishna, by the end of chapter 6, is saying what the highest perfection is of yoga, which is worshiping him and serving him with love and devotion. This is like transcendental to all the other yogas, and yet that doesn't mean that all the other yogic practices have no value or don't support one's bhakti yoga practice. So I guess I'm coming to the class with a question, do we need to be balanced in all these other areas of life? I mean, based on the Acharya, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, yes, because this is his example. So he's teaching us by example how to be balanced in all areas of life. So yes, I have a question, like I'm not fully realized in this topic, but yeah, I'm thinking Srila Prabhupada would like us to be balanced in all areas of our life so that we can be really perfecting and executing in excellence our service to the Lord. So we're not like deviated and distracted and from the path, that we can stay steady on the path back to the Lord, steady on the path of thinking of Krishna, remembering Krishna, chanting his names and his glories and hearing about Krishna, so we can really stay on that path. I think we do need to follow the guidance for the most part. I mean, I don't know about the kusa grass and everything, but I don't think that's who am I to say? I mean, maybe if Krishna says it, then yes, I mean, that would help. But it's hard for me to believe that, we really need a special type of grass to sit on. But I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't know what kusa grass is, so I don't know. But anyway, setting that aside, specific ways of sitting and breathing and what to sit on. Yeah, I'm gonna not finish that sentence. I don't really know where I'm going because I'm feeling a little distracted, but Hare Krishna. So so in previous classes recently, we talked about like pouring water on the fire. So so there's like a metaphor that, when we step out of the regulations, like the 4 regulative principles of freedom, and other types of regulations, like for the example is in chapter 6, that it's like pouring water on the fire of our bhakti yoga practice. So like we have a chanting and we're cultivating Krishna consciousness, but then we can do things that just like make it hard for the fire to burn or just put the fire out. So the regulative principles and the different yoga, the different yogic lifestyle practices all sort of go hand in hand and really support and keep the fire burning for bhakti yoga. Prabhupada, I found a quote from him from a lecture on the Nectar of Devotion from November 5th, 1972 in Vrindavan. He says, so the example is that in the fire, you go on giving fuel perpetually. It will burn into ashes. Similarly, it doesn't matter. To become sinful, without Krishna consciousness, everyone is sinful. So to become sinful is not disqualification, because everyone is sinful. But if one takes to Krishna consciousness is just like the fire, and the sinful activities are just like wood. But when the wood is in touch with the fire, so the fire would burn all the wood's fuel into ashes. But we should not. Once we take to Krishna consciousness, we should stop the pillars of sinful activities. Whatever we did in our past life, that is excused. But if we take to Krishna consciousness, and if we go on with our own sinful activities, that will not help us. Just like the same fire. You take the fuel and add to the fire, it will burn into ashes. But at the same time, if you pour some water also, then it will be useless. Similarly, our past sinful activities that can be burned into ashes, provided we don't add any more. Okay, let me say that again. Similarly, our past sinful activities, that could be burned into ashes, provided we don't add any more. Don't take it, quote, now it will burn into ashes. So go on this business and that business, end quote. No. That business means pouring water into the fire. It will not burn. So, yes, so when we step into this sattvic living and this yogic lifestyle, it can be like, it can feel like not like totally enjoyable. It can feel austere and bitter and like not as tasteful as we had a previous taste for things that were of a lower mode. And so when we step into sattvic yogic living and practice bhakti yoga, it's a mode of goodness, or even it's a transcendental mode, pure goodness. And we can resist and just want to avoid it, and like kind of, I think this is probably true for maybe everyone here. We still have our conditionings, and we're still acting in those ways that were like our lower self. And even though it's logical to just never do any of that stuff again and become a pure devotee, or right away, obviously that would be like the perfect, that would just be like wonderful to just drop all of our conditioning and not act in those lower modes. It's not really practical. It's a gradual process to step out of our conditioning and to cultivate a devotional attitude towards Krishna. And it's helpful just to understand like the overall, like where we're going and where we're coming from, and like what's happening internally for us, when we're resisting acting in the mode of goodness and acting in a really like balanced way. Prabhupada says in chapter 18, text 36 and 37, Krishna is saying this in the translation. Krishna says, "O best of the Bharatas, now please hear from me about the three kinds of happiness in which the conditioned soul enjoys, and by which he sometimes comes to the end of all distress. That which in the beginning may be just like poison, but at the end is just like nectar, and which awakens one to self-realization, is said to be happiness in the mode of goodness." In the purport, Prabhupada says, "A conditioned soul tries to enjoy material happiness again and again. Thus he chews the chewed, but sometimes in the course of such enjoyment he becomes relieved from material entanglement by association with the great soul." In other words, a conditioned soul is always engaged in some type of sense gratification, but when he understands by good association that it is only a repetition of the same thing, and he is awakened to his real Krishna consciousness. He is sometimes relieved from such repetitive so-called happiness. In the pursuit of self-realization, one has to follow many rules and regulations to control the mind and the senses, and to concentrate the mind on the self. All these procedures are very difficult, bitter, like poison. But if one is successful in following the regulations and comes to the transcendental position, he begins to drink real nectar, and he enjoys life. So it's kind of funny how we just keep doing things that like sabotage ourselves. Not really funny, it's kind of sad, but it's also just like right now I'm thinking it's just so ridiculous. The other day I was standing in front of the dishes in my kitchen sink. So I resist the dishes. And the way I was raised was to clear the table off and like put the dirty dishes next to the sink. Done. You know, that's where the dishes go, next to the sink. And like I often just stop right there, and I'm like, every time it's time to do the dishes, I have to overcome resistance to doing them. You know, every once in a while I free-spiritedly am inspired, and sometimes I get into it and I get them all done, mode of passion, but it's usually mode of ignorance, like done. You know, the dishes are there, the counter's cleared, the table's cleared, there's enough pots to cook the next meal, you know. And I was sitting there like, man, I was thinking, what if I just did what I was supposed to do right now and do the dishes? And I was looking at the altar and I was like, oh, this feels so boring. You know, this feels so mundane to just do dishes. Like I could be doing something exciting. I could do some big project. I could make things happen in the world. And like, what do I have in front of me is just dirty dishes. Like I'd rather them go in the garbage. Like I'd rather just Garuda come and do the dishes. Like I'd rather just not have this issue. So anyway, I extended that to like, you know, what if I just did what I was like supposed to do or should do like all day? Would I just feel like so much pain? Like it would just be so bitter and just like, ugh, you know, I'm doing what I'm supposed to. I'm just standing up tall, sitting up straight, and doing the next right thing. Like how could I even live like that? I'm so far from that excellence and integrity. Just like, you know, so far from that. And all areas of my life are just like modes of ignorance and passion. It's just such a mix. And so I'm sort of baffled, but you know, and I just feel like I'm waking up to the fact that I'm on a yogic path. And I'm the initiation experience. It's like giving a new identity, like with a name, having a new name, Damayanti, Devi, Dasi. It's helping to give like a new identity. And that's really helpful. Like, and I'm starting to like identify as someone who's on a very specific path that includes austerities for an ultimate goal, not just, you know, I mean, one of the results of doing these austerities is being happy and enjoying life and being satisfied within myself. And I can see that just makes so much sense. Like ultimately I'll feel like so empowered and alive, enlivened, you know, I feel more powerful to live in integrity, you know, in every moment. Excuse me. So it's like it's a practice. So this bhakti yoga lifestyle and it's a practice, something to work towards, and things that assist our goal of walking on this path towards serving the Lord with all of our heart and with everything in our life, everything that we have. There's many things that can support. It's like I'm thinking like there's the essential, which is just loving and serving God, and then there's all the essential bhakti yoga practices given by Srila Prabhupada, and then there's a wider view, which is having regulations and you know, a whole balanced life that supports all of that, which supports the essence, which is remembering, serving, and loving God. And then outside of that, well, like, how do I live as a yogi? so there are even like more things that support that, which I mean, this essence for me is like association, like not doing it alone. And there's, you know, obviously associating with others who are also practicing bhakti yoga, just being together, but also like there's support structures and there's supportive relationships where you check in, have accountability. I find personally accountability is like really what works for me to make commitments that feel austere, that keep, you know, keep me out of trouble with my sense gratification. You know, like recently I started to eat in a way that's more balanced. So I'm eating 3 meals a day, not snacking in between, and I'm not having foods that trigger. I just wanted to share, this is like kind of like a big like impulse for this whole class is like regulating my eating. And maybe like I look somewhat like thin or something, but maybe that's just a high metabolism or whatever, some type of body type. But as far as like my how I was like raised and like what is my conditioning, it includes a lot of escaping through like food. And I know most people probably have that. Some they could relate to that. But so I am regulating. So I'm not eating foods that are like triggering, that would be addictive foods, like chips and crackers and popcorn and desserts, like anything with like a sugar, like a sweet. Those things can trigger me and I'll overeat them and then I feel sick and then I can't live my life and it's just ugh. So I just am aware of that and sick of it. And so I'm following a specific program and I have an accountability buddy in North Carolina. She's on the same sort of diet type of eating. And it's like it's basically a food addiction program, but a lot of people use it maybe to lose weight. For me, it's more about like calming down that part of me that wants to that's triggered in eating and to escape something that you know, avoid something or numb myself. So I've been doing that. I've done it in the past and then I got off track and I'm back on track for like a couple of weeks here. And it's like such a practice to just stay on track. And like for me, yeah, like just an example of weights. This is just one example of how to support ourselves to live that balanced yogi lifestyle is accountability. That's just one example. And I think other people would, I mean, I didn't like have like a list here today of like different ways to support ourselves. There's prayer and yeah, there's all kinds of like techniques, especially in Sattva Tov. And, you know, in the coaching relationships, we get different types of homework assignments and you know, there's support available. And it takes like, you know, it takes some humility to admit like, I'm actually this addicted to something that it's getting in the way. And it doesn't, like for me, like, you know, saying I have like a food addiction, it's like humbling to admit that. And it's like, doesn't match how I want to be perceived in the world, and the way I'm acting doesn't match my values, or, you know, I'm way out of integrity if I'm acting on the actual addiction. And, you know, so it's very humbling to admit how conditioned we are and where we're at, but it's like the ticket to get out of that misery. So it's worth it to admit, like, and actually tell other souls, this is the truth of how I'm like acting, and this is the truth of how far I am from balance and health and bright, you know, shining my light. So that's like really important, I think. So association to me, association of some form, accountability, support, coaching, being around others, and just speaking the truth, speaking honestly about where you're at. So it's generally to me like one of the most important things. So I'm going to read one last quote from Srila Prabhupada. He says, this is in the Chaitanya Charitamrita preface. He says, Lord Chaitanya's teachings are identical to those given by Lord Kapila, the original propounder of Sankhya Yoga, the Sankhya system of philosophy. This authorized system of yoga teaches meditation on the transcendental form of the Lord. There is no question of meditating on something void or impersonal. When one can meditate on the transcendental form of Lord Vishnu, even without practicing involved sitting posture such as meditation is called perfect samadhi. That this kind of meditation is perfect samadhi is confirmed at the end of the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad-gita, where Lord Krishna says that of all yogis, the greatest is the one who constantly thinks of the Lord within the core of his heart with love and devotion. I remember one thing that up here that was kind of nice. It was like a little description of Krishna. I'm not sure where it is. I'm not sure if I have that note. Anyway, I'm gonna stop there. So thank you for studying and taking a look at chapter 6 and Bhagavad Gita with me. Hare Krishna. I welcome anyone to discuss thoughts or questions or realizations from what I shared.
Hi, Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Narayan.
After I speak, I see George is raising his hand electronically.
Oh, I was switching my screen.
Because you're not a host.
Mhm.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate your class and your sharing. I was thinking one thing that came up early on was in thinking about like the different yoga systems and bhakti and like the uniqueness of bhakti is like I was laughing with Malini at the beginning of the class because I think you said something about like postures or sitting or something, and I just I thought of I often listen to a recording of Srila Prabhupada chanting japa where he says sit properly. Once in a while he'll just say like sit properly, and like that really helps me. It really helps me be like more present with my japa. And sometimes I like to imagine like a room full of like devotees and some hippies off some like psychedelic vendor just kind of slouching, and I really identify with that. And so Srila Prabhupada like telling me to like sit properly, I feel more present with my japa. And just today, serendipitously before our japa period, I was reading from a letter where someone asked Srila Prabhupada about like the importance of like sitting, and they mentioned like how Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada would sit, like it's mentioned like he would sit very like straight back, like aligned while chanting and stuff, and Srila Prabhupada saying like, well, he's like a perfect brahmachari, and like that's not necessary for you, like it's not. So for me that like really illustrates how it's like what you were saying, like the sitting is helpful, and clearly like Srila Prabhupada is helping us. For me and like that recording, he's like really helping me be present with my japa, and at the same time like my understanding is like the principle is like it's not about the sitting, and like bhakti isn't limited by what posture we're in, and at the same time there are things that we can do that are like more conducive to chanting, to developing bhakti, just like sattva. It's like it's not necessary to be sattvic to practice bhakti yoga. It's not necessary to be sattvic to like have realizations about our position and our connection with Krishna, and feel that love and desire to serve. And at the same time it's like a lot more likely that we would. And the last thing I'll mention is like also relevant to something that I've been thinking about in like the last 2 days. It's like right now it's Purushottamam Mas, like the month of Purushottam, the month of the Supreme Personality. And this is like a thing that happens on the Vedic calendar every like almost 3 years, like a leap year. And it's like super auspicious, and it's a great time to take like extra commitment and vows, and it's very observed by a lot of Vaishnavas, and I don't think Prabhupada really ever goes into it. And like for me it's like another thing where like there's so many things that are beneficial and auspicious that they're not necessarily like, you know, if we don't do them, we're like not going to advance on the path and attain that supreme abode and relationship.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, you're having your personal realizations about like sitting and your bhakti yoga practice, and you find it interesting how Srila Prabhupada, he's giving the essence, and then but the thing is, you know, Krishna in different forms, he's teaching us about all the benefits and all the auspiciousness of different rituals in the Vedic culture and society, and Prabhupada doesn't give it all or even focus on it all. He had a specific goal in mind, which is to give the essence, bhakti, and it's possible. It's totally possible to experience perfection in bhakti yoga without all of those rituals and even understanding or even knowing about them, to still be a devotee. Yeah, but there's things that help us. Yeah, thank you for sharing. George, you raised your hand? Oh, and Anasuya. Everybody, welcome. Mother Anasuya, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yes, thank you for class this morning. I really love reading the chapter all at once with the Bhagavad-gita transformative coaching class. We had started to do that, reading the Sanskrit and then the English translation, and read through the whole chapter first before beginning to dive in. And so I really appreciated you leading class in that manner, using the English, and really connected me. Really appreciate your sharing about your process after initiation. And I wanted to share that I feel like through this yogic practice, it's really helped me. So like last night, I had a really long day. I had to stay till 6:30 at work. I had to run to my home in Melrose. I was on my way to Gainesville. 7 o'clock, a tree falls down on State Road 26. And I'm stuck and waiting for a crew to come cut the tree, move it off the road. It took an hour and a half. And I was so thankful for that time, whereas I saw everyone else becoming really agitated, blowing their horns, getting out, looking, deciding to turn around, go back. And I was just sitting very comfortably in my car, and I was chanting because I hadn't finished my rounds for the day. So I was really appreciative that I could finish my rounds. And then it was like my windows were down and people were like smoking and talking, and I was just singing. And I just felt like I'm in my own protective little world. And if anybody wants to hear me chant or hear me sing, then so be it. And it was just like, and I was so grateful for the workers that came out because it was getting dark. And so they were doing this so that everyone else could get onto their path. And it made me think of Prabhupada standing in line at the airport, and someone was asking why he was not agitated. And he was like, why be agitated? And so I just really liked the calmness that the bhakti yoga practice brings in my life. And so I hear that sometimes it is agitating for you, and it can be agitating for me. But then when I choose to do something with that time that's in service, it feels really, really special, and like just the perfect timing to give me that space. And so I just wanted to share what happened for me last night.
You experienced yourself joyful even in the face of agitating circumstances. You were rushing, and you decided you chose what you have in a transcendental way to just chant and sing and be happy. And it's simple. It brings you so much joy.
Yeah, and at 9 o'clock I was home finally, and with my family, and all was well, and so I was safe, and they were safe, and so yeah, it felt yeah, good just to be held in that way for that time. Thank you again, Damayanti. Hare Krishna.
Surprise, it's not George.
It's
me, I'm here.
welcome. Hi.
Thank you, Hare Krishna. I'm loving the class this morning, and I'm really appreciating where you're taking it. It feels, it resonates with me a lot about, you know, what I'm personally discovering about myself. And so I thought to share because I got excited about what you were saying. And yeah, so yeah, my name is Danielle Mara, and I'm not a perfect person, that's for sure. And I like that. I like almost like an imperfect person anonymous meeting. That's how I feel when I come to these. I'm like, hey, I'm allowed to drop all the masks and just be like a person for a second. And I haven't been very historically nice about it with myself. Like I'm not a very like historically prone to being like super kind and gentle with my own process. So I've been very frustrated with my progression and my strategies for living and my showing up, and you know, it hasn't looked the way I wanted it to look. And that's been really frustrating because I feel like I've been doing this a long time. I feel like for me, I feel like I've been doing it a long time. I know other people have been doing it for like 30, 60, you know, lifetimes. But for me, I feel like I've really put in some effort. Like, why am I not getting the results? And I understand about myself that I refuse, like, because we talk about integrity, and I refuse to be a fake it till you make it person. Like, I don't do well with white knuckling or just trying to make things look externally the way I want them to and hope that that reaches me internally. I feel like it's counterproductive in my process to drink a bunch of poison and hope eventually it tastes like sugar. I mean, I get that. Not that anyone is doing that, and not that I'm like saying that, you know, there isn't benefit to having external structures, because for sure I have some external structure, and like you're saying, accountability and association, and I feel like those are trellises that support my Bhakti Lakta beach to grow. But I wanted bigger changes, and I feel like I've been really struggling in that area, and I've been resisting the gentleness that I have available for myself because I haven't seen huge sweeping, you know, like epic, you know, life balance that you're talking about. And just recently, a dear friend of mine was referred me to a book that she was referred to by another dear friend of ours, and it's the 7 Habits of Highly Effective Families. And in it, Stephen Covey talks about the miracle of the Chinese bamboo and how it's watered and planted for 4 years and looks like it's pretty much dead. Like there's like just a little shoot that comes out of it for 4 years. And then on the 5th year, it springs up like 80 feet. It has like all this like transformative growth, like pretty much visibly immediately after the 5th year. And I had never heard about this plant before, but I like metaphors of plants better than I like fire metaphors. I don't know why. I just really resonate with plant metaphors. So it really spoke to me. And I thought, okay, well, let me check in with myself. Like, what is my root structure like? You know, like, what's my root structure like? And I'm like, wow, like I can connect with this. I can connect with the gratification of like strong root structures, you know, like you guys are super strong root structures for me. You know, having even like changed my house to having pictures everywhere and an altar and setting up, you know, devotional dolls for my daughter and like silly things that I think maybe I don't give myself any sort of space for appreciation in at all. Those are my root structures. You know, those are my foundational core. Like that's where I'm really strengthening myself. And I don't see a lot of, I don't know, like leaves or like fruit blossoming, but that's okay. Like that's okay. I'm still in my couple of years of like gardening, you know, my couple of years of watering process. And I don't need it to look, maybe I don't need it to look that way. So I'm kind of playing with that paradigm of, yeah, I'm not totally equiposed. I'm not 100% balanced in every area of my life, you know, but where am I devoting my energy and how is my gardening going anyways? You know, that's where I'm playing with anyways. So I thought to share with you guys. Thanks for hearing me.
Thank you for sharing. It sounds like you connected with compassion and a spirit of discovery about your own growth process. And through doing that, it gives you a lot of excitement and energy. you know, and to keep it going, you know, instead of the other paradigm. And I can relate, being harsh with yourself. I can be very harsh with myself. I can relate to that. And anyway, yeah, by doing that, it I think it can just like stall things a little longer, you know, to the progress that you wish to make. That harsh environment, it's not a sacred space for growth, and so we can create sacred space for ourselves and be curious. And it's humbling, I think, from, you know, my experience. It's humbling to say, oh, this is the conditioning of this soul. This soul has a conditioning. Just taking a look objectively, like, oh, that's the conditioning I carry, and start from there. But yeah, I like how you're seeing your progress. Like, you can see progress. There is, yeah, there is progress on your path. There's a root structure, and you're feeling more enthusiasm. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Daniel. Be happy to hear from anyone else if you'd like to share.
Hare Krishna.
Hi.
So, yeah, thank you so much for class. I just want to share that what's coming up for me, especially towards the end of the readings we just did, I'm connecting with this idea of detachment as the key. It's like underscoring, I feel like, at least this was I'm connecting with in this chapter you just read with us. And yeah, like I'm really trying to be more aware and examine where my attachments are in everyday life. Especially as we're transitioning now to trying to find work and you know, like things that like money and being ideas of money being thrown around and sense of security and all these notions that I feel like can bewilder my clarity, because I can see myself getting attached. I can see myself getting attached to, oh, I want a secure job because, you know, that only the Sarasvati gets to eat, or, you know, and then it's like having that sense of detachment or presence of awareness, I would say. It's like, well, it's like Sarasvati's alive because Krishna willed her to be alive, and she's safe because, you know, he's keeping her safe. And to approach those interactions, whether it's job interviews or daily tasks, like doing the dishes, like you were mentioning, it's like just detaching from all these frameworks that I think about, like the, you know, reward principle and all the anxiety that that builds. And let me just clean the dishes because it's Krishna's kitchen, and Krishna's kitchen, you know, that'll give him some joy if it's clean, you know, like, so I'm just really focusing on this detachment principle as a way to from fruitive activities, from all these things that my mind comes up with. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that. You're detaching from the thoughts and fears and desires that come through you, waves of waves of attachments and desires that, you know, you're observing it. You're taking a step back and saying, oh, I see, you know, I have this desire. But your preference is really to keep Krishna in the center and not worry about like not be too stressed about what happens externally. And
yeah, I mean, that's the thing, because there's so much about, I feel like we're in this machine and we have to engage. Our senses are dragging us one way and this way, and yeah, it's people ask, where do you see yourself in 1 year, 3 years, 5 years? And it's like being able to detach from like the material, like what we call landmarks and things like that. I'm focusing, it's like, well, I want to grow my Bhakti Lakta Beach. I want to deepen my devotion in my 3rd year more than my 1st year, you know? And then what that looks like externally, just give it to God, like not not worry, oh my God, am I giving the perfect answer to this person, or am I, well, it's just like all that is just, it's just like smoke, it's just smoke. And it's like we're talking about dousing the fire. It's like, it's just all smoke. It's just like, where am I going to be? I want to be a more sincere devotee in 5 years than I am in 3 years, and so forth. So keeping that has very much like a pacifying, calming kind of, I don't know, effect on my consciousness.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you're focused on the essence of what's important in your life, you keep that focus. You feel satisfied and peaceful. You're letting go of the temporary situations that come and go. You can see through. Like, yeah, that might happen, might not. It might last. It might not last. Like, things will eventually change, but you want to stay focused. That brings you peace.
Yeah, there's this like scene in the movie The Matrix that is like very present with me, where like he gets up and he looks at the wall, and then you see a first person view where like what he's actually looking at is a code like behind the wall, like he's seeing, and there's this like wonder in him. And I feel like the more this process of bhakti that we practice, just endeavoring for devotion, it's like the more I'm starting to see like chips in the wall. Like I'm starting to see things that are just enough like striking my curiosity to give me that moment of awareness to detach, because I'm starting to see some of the code. I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know if you've seen The Matrix, but it's like the more I practice this, it's like the more I'm able to start seeing enough like having some more awareness to detach more, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And without endeavoring, this is just kind of happening.
Yeah, you're seeing through illusion.
Well, just maybe chips of it, like I'm like enough where I'm having some touchstones of awareness throughout the day of like, oh, okay. Yeah. Anyway, Hare Krishna. Thank you for
Hare
listening.
Krishna. Yeah, that sounds exciting. All right, everyone. Well, thank you for being with me. Would anyone else like to share? I think we're done. Dear Govinda. All right. Haribol. Bhagavad-gita ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.